For more on the markets abroad and what we can expect on Wall Street this coming week, we're joined now by Euro-Pacific CEO, Chief Global Strategist, Peter Schiff. Peter, good to have you with us. Peter is the author of the book, How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. Joining us in our studios here in New York City, Moody's Chief Economist, John Lonsky. John, good to have you with us. Let's start with that report coming out of Japan. That's better news than we had expected.
Yeah, that's decent news, and what that is telling us is that perhaps this loss of output to the Japanese earthquake is not going to serve us that well as an excuse for weak economic activity in the United States. If Japan's doing better than expected, then we can't point to the earthquake and say that's the source of our problem. It's also reminding us that Asia's economies are still growing quite briskly, especially in the case of China.
And your take from it, Peter?
Well, first of all, I think the real story in Japan is how much good money is the Japanese government going to throw after bad in trying to buy the U.S. dollar and propping it up. You know, the stock market gets all the headlines, but I think the real markets that we need to watch are the foreign exchange markets and the bond market, because the Fed can always prop up the stock market by printing money, at least nominally. But if we get a crack in the dollar and a crack in the bond market, that's really the beginning of the end. And I think that's happening right now. And the Bank of Japan is trying to fight this. Other foreign central banks are trying to prop up the dollar. But I think ultimately they're going to be overwhelmed by selling.
Even as the Nikkei is rising 1.5%, I mean, that was for the most part beyond any expectation. Even the most positive of the economists in the consensus weren't that aggressive. John?
That would be right. You know, that's true. This is a surprisingly good news from Japan. We've got to be heartened by the response of the Japanese stock market. And perhaps if Europe does better later today, they get off on the right foot, that could bode well for the opening session on Wall Street. And we need some positive momentum in order to avoid the type of debacle that we just went through.
Well, no one is more positive than Peter Schiff. Peter, is that what you're expecting tomorrow?
Well, you know, the problem for us is if Europe gets its act together, you know, the one thing that's holding up the dollar is fears over the euro. But I think that there's so much real pressure now on France, on Italy, on Spain to actually cut government spending because they can't print euros, and there's real pressure on them. I think they're going to do it. And when they do, it's going to put the spotlight right back on the dollar, because we are doing nothing to stop our deficits. We're relying on the fact that we can print money to have to do nothing. But it's the fact that we can print money that makes our financial assets so risky, both the dollar and the bond market.
Who do you think will be printing in Europe?
Well, nobody's. They can't. All the countries, France or Italy or Germany, they can't print euros. The ECB has to do that.
Yes, I understand. But I thought I heard you say that they're going to be doing that.
No, here. I mean, we're going to do that here.
We're doing that now, though.
Yeah, we're not cutting back on anything. The world is giving us a lot of rope, and we're hanging ourselves with it. Yeah. Other countries have to make the tough choices. We don't. We think we can.
Here's something I don't understand. And Peter, forgive me for this. But John, as we listen to Peter, I mean, it seems to be an absolute cognitive dissonance at work here. This is a president who's had to retreat from spending trillions of dollars in his 2012 budget over the course of the next decade. This is a Congress that's had to focus on how to constrain spending. This is a public that just about 3/4 of whom want our budget brought under control. This looks to me to be a tectonic shift in direction, potential change in direction for this country. And we're talking in some ways behaving as if it's, you know, none of this has transpired.
Yeah, if you're going to have all of this fiscal austerity going forward, not only at the federal level, but state and local governments as well, this is going to put more downward pressure on interest rates as we move into the future. I mean, you know, without any indication of QE3 on its own, the 10-year Treasury yield has sunk to 2.25%. It may yet move even lower.
It hasn't done it on its own. It's had a lot of help from the Fed. It's had a lot of help from foreign central banks. Why do you think rates are so low? And it's not because we have no inflation. I mean, we have plenty of inflation.
Oh, you have price deflation in housing that you still have to take into account.
But that's not the, no,
I think
we
one of the great
falling
lessons
housing.
The recent past is we cannot ignore asset price inflation or deflation.
No, housing prices are falling, but the cost of owning a home is going up. Maintenance, insurance, taxes. I mean, prices are rising. assets going down. That's not deflation. We've got a rise in the cost of living. Consumers have to spend more money
the Fed made back in 2003, 2004. They ignored real estate price inflation and paid a heavy price for having done so.
Well, I know, and you know, Moody's might have missed the subprime crisis. I didn't. I got that right.
Okay.
And I understand that there is a lot of inflation.
Peter, that was very gallant of you to, and noble, I thought, to do that. Let's talk about a couple of inflationary pressures. One, we're looking at crude oil at $85. We're watching energy prices decline, not rise. We're looking at housing that is at 12-year lows here. We're watching disinflation at the very least. There seems to me at least to be the prospect of deflation at hand, despite the injection of trillions of dollars into this financial system. That seems to me to be worrying, not something we should ignore.
Lou, don't confuse falling asset prices with deflation. We're not getting the money supply.
I confused it with disinflation. And silly me.
Yeah. But it's not happening. The money supply is expanding. Look at the price of gold. Gold would be $1,700 an ounce if we didn't have inflation. The Fed is inflating like mad. Oil prices wouldn't be $85 a barrel if there wasn't inflation. Look at food prices. And where do you see the Chinese RMB?
Peter,
the RMB is going up.
An absolutely horrific predictor of price inflation over the past 20 or 30 years. It's never done a good job. We've had gold soaring ever since 2001, more or less, and yet we find that these measures of price inflation that you criticize, these measures of price inflation that you're citing have been well contained. CPI, PCE, price index.
I think we can agree. Peter, let me interrupt, if I may. I think we can agree on this. I would hope you, John, myself, others, that we have not seen anything like the hyperinflation that was anticipated as a result of both the Treasury and the Fed's policy.
Hyperinflation is a whole different ballgame, but we are seeing inflation.
Just for fun.
Hold on.
Just for fun. No, you hold on. Just for fun. You respond to my question, and then we'll deal with yours. Yeah.
No, we haven't. I'm hoping we avoid hyperinflation, but we're going to have high inflation. But if you measured inflation, if they had the same CPI as we had in the 1970s, we're dealing with almost 10% inflation right now, and we have for the last few years. The problem is the government is lying about inflation.
The Weimar Republic will have to wait. Life will not be a cabaret anytime soon. And I think this obsession with inflation that some of the markets have is totally overdone, exaggerated. The worry is we don't have enough of real economic growth. We don't have enough jobs. Who cares about inflation at this point in time? Does it make any difference if core inflation is 2% or 4%?
No. People aren't worried enough about inflation. And just because we have high unemployment.
Let's go to John's point, which is the point of this broadcast. In fact, the focus of this network, and that is prosperity, the return to growth, creation of jobs. 25 million Americans right now are suffering and in deep pain, Peter. And the the rather arcane discussion of whether real inflation is at 3.5% or 8.9 is really irrelevant even to the policy.
It's not irrelevant to people who are struggling to make ends meet. The reason that real wages are falling is because
there has to be a time at some point we start talking in the aggregate and in the total of this economy. If we can bounce from sector to sector, element to element, but we really have to start focusing, it seems to me, much as our policymakers have refused to do, on restoring this country to prosperity. And by the way, then we can get to the discussion of what the trade-offs are and do an intelligent job of making such an assessment.
You're right.
And I lied. John Lunsky didn't get the last word. Peter Schiff, you did as
I tried.
You devil, you. Thanks, Peter Schiff. Thanks for being with us. John Lunsky, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Well, this programming note, please join us here tomorrow at our regular time, 7 Eastern on the Fox Business Network.